Yet with a gentle gale, that round about the dying prince cool Boreas did exhale, he was revived, recomforted, that else had grieved and died. All this time flight drave to the Argive. All this time flight drave to the fleet the Argives, who applied no weapon against the proud pursuit, nor ever turned ahead. They knew proud pursuit, nor ever turned ahead. They knew so well that Mars pursued, and dreadful Hector led. Then who was first, who last, whose lives the iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector? The iron Mars did seize, and Priam's Hector. Helenus, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes. Enopides. Priam's Hector. Helenus, surnamed Enopides, good Teuthras, and Orestes, skilled in managing of horse, bold Enomaus, and a man in managing of horse, bold Enomaus, and a man renowned for martial force, Trachis, the great Aetolian chief, Oresbius, Trachis, renowned for martial force, skilled in managing of horse, bold Enomaus, and a man renowned for martial force, Trachis, the great Aetolian chief. Oresbius, that did wear the gaudy mitre, studied with Oresbius, that did wear the gaudy mitre, studied wealth extremely. Gaudy mitre, studied wealth extremely. That did wear the gaudy mitre, studied wealth extremely, and dwelt near the Atlantic lake. Sophistides. That did wear the gaudy mitre, studied wealth extremely, and dwelt near the Atlantic lake Sophistides, in Hyla, by whose seat the good men of Boeotia dwelt. This slaughter in Hyla, by whose seat the good men of Boeotia dwelt. This slaughter grew so great, it flew to heaven. Saturnia discerned it, and cried out to Pallas, "O unworthy sight!" Juno. Who was that? To heaven. Saturnia discerned it. To heaven. Saturnia discerned it, and cried out to Pallas, "O unworthy sight, to see a field so fought, and break our words to Sparta's king, that Ilion should be raced, and he return revenged, when thus we see his Greeks disgraced, and bear the harmful rage of Mars. Come, let us use our care, that we dishonor not our powers." Minerva was as yare as she at the our powers. Minerva was as yare as she at the despite of Troy. Minerva was as yare as she at the despite of Troy. Her golden bridled steeds then the despite of Troy. Her golden bridled steeds then Saturn's daughter. Her golden bridled steeds then Saturn's daughter brought abroad. And Hebe she proceeds to address her chariot. Instantly she gives it either wheel, beamed with 8 spokes of sounding brass. The axle-tree was steel, the fellifs incorruptible gold, their upper brands of brass, their matter most unvalued, their work of wondrous grace. The naves, in which the spokes were driven, were all with silver bound. The chariot's seat, 2 hoops of gold and silver strengthened round, edged with a gold and silver fringe. The beam that looked before was massy silver. The beam that looked before was massy silver, on whose top gears all of gold it wore, and golden poitrils. All of gold it wore, and golden poitrils. Juno mounts. All of gold it wore, and golden poitrils. Juno mounts, and her hot horses reined that thirsted for her hot horses reined. Juno mounts, and her hot horses reined that thirsted for contention, and still of peace complained. Minerva wrapped her in the robe that curiously she complained. Minerva wrapped her in the robe that curiously she wove with glorious colors as she sate on the azure. Glorious colors as she sate on the azure floor. As she sate on the azure floor. On the azure floor of Jove. On the azure floor. As she sate on the azure floor of Jove. With glorious colors as she sate on the azure floor of Jove. And wore the arms that he puts on, bent to the tearful field. About to the tearful field. About her broad spread to the tearful field. About her broad spread shoulders hung this huge and horrid shield. About her broad spread shoulders hung this. About her broad spread shoulders hung his huge and horrid shield, fringed round with ever-fighting snakes, though it was drawn to life, the miseries and deaths of fight. In it frowned bloody strife. In it frowned bloody strife. In it shined sacred fortitude. In it fell pursuit flew. In it the monster Gorgon's head, in which held out to view were all the dire ostents of Jove. To view where all the dire ostents of Jove. On her big head she placed his four-plumed glittering casque of gold, so admirably vast it would 100 garrisons of soldiers comprehend. Then to her shining chariot her vigorous feet ascend, and in her violent hand she takes his grave, huge, solid lance, with which the conquests of her wrath she useth to advance, and overturns whole fields of men, to show she was the seed of him that thunders. Then heaven's queen, to urge her horses' speed, takes up the scourge, and forth they fly. The ample gates of heaven rung, and flew open of themselves, the charge whereof is given, with all Olympus and the sky, to the distinguished hours, that clear or hide it all in clouds, or pour it down in showers. This way their scourge-obeying horse made haste, and soon they won the top of all the topful heavens, where aged Saturn's son sat severed from the other gods. Then stayed the white-armed queen her steeds, and asked of Jove if Mars did not incense his spleen with his foul deeds, in ruining so many and so great in the command and grace of Greece, and in so rude a heat, at which she said, Apollo laughed, and Venus, who still sue to that mad god for violence that never justice knew, for whose impiety she asked if, with his wished love, herself might free the field of him. He bade her rather move Athenia to charge the field of him. He bade her rather move Athenia to the charge she sought, who used of old to be the bane of Mars, and had the bane of Mars, who used of old to be the bane of Mars, and had as well the gift of spoil as he. This grace she slacked not, but her horse scourged, that in nature flew betwixt the cope of stars and earth, and how far at a view a man into the purple sea may from a hill descry, so far a high neighing horse of heaven at every jump would fly. Arrived at Troy, where, broken curls, the two floods mixed their force, Scamander and bright Simois, Saturnia stayed her horse, took them from chariot, and a cloud of mighty depth diffused, about them, and the verdant banks of Simois produced in nature what they eat in heaven. Then both the goddesses marched, like a pair of timorous doves, in hasting their access to the Argives' succor. Eat in heaven. Then both the goddesses marched, like a pair of timorous doves, in hasting their access to the Argives' succor. Being arrived where both the most and best were heaped together, showing all like lions at a feast of new-slain carcasses, or boars beyond encounter strong. There found they Diomed, and there, midst all the admiring throng, Saturnia put on Stentor's shape, that had a brazen voice, and spake as loud as 50 men, like whom she made a noise, and chid the Argives. O ye Greeks, in name and outward rite, but princes only, not in act. O ye Greeks, in name and outward rite, but princes only, not in act. What scandal, what despite use ye to honor? All the time the great Aeacides was conversant in arms. Your foes durst not a foot address without their ports. So much they feared his lance that all controlled, and now they outray to your fleet. This did with shame make bold the general spirit and power of Greece, when, with particular note of their disgrace, Athenia made Tydeus issue hot. She found him at his chariot, refreshing of his wound, inflicted by slain Pandarus. His sweat did so abound, it much annoyed him underneath the broad belt of his shield, with which, and tired of his toil, his soul could hardly yield his body motion. With his hand he lifted up the belt, and wiped away that clotted blood, the fervent wound did melt. Lifted up the belt, and wiped away that clotted blood, the fervent wound did melt. Minerva leaned against his horse, and near their withers laid her sacred hand, then spake to him, "Believe me, Diomed, Minerva, I am sent from Juno." Her sacred hand then spake to him, "Believe me, Diomed, Tydeus exampled not himself. Tydeus exampled not himself in thee his son, not great, but in thee his son. Not great, but yet he was a soldier, a man of so much heat, that in his embassy for Thebes, when I forbade his mind to be too venturous, and when feasts his heart might have declined, with which they welcomed him, he made a challenge to the best, and foiled the best. I gave him aid, because the rust of rest that would have seized another mind he suffered not, but used the trial I made like a man, and their soft feast refused. Yet when I set thee on, thou faint'st. I guard thee, charge, exhort, that I, abetting thee, thou shouldst be to the Greeks a fort, and dismay to Ilion. To the Greeks a fort, and a dismay to Ilion. Yet thou obeyest in naught, afraid or slothful, or else both. Henceforth renounce all thought that ever thou wert Tydeus' son. He answered her. Okay, Diomedes, and we should make him sound like he's injured, because he is. Suppress thine anger's powers, good friend. Hence, obeyest in naught, afraid or slothful, or else both. Henceforth renounce all thought that ever thou wert Tydeus' son. He answered her, I know thou art Jove's daughter, and for that in all just duty owe thy speech's reverence. Yet affirm ingeniously that fear doth neither hold me spiritless, nor sloth. I only bear thy charge in zealous memory, that I should never war with any blessed deity, unless exceeding far the limits of her rule, the queen that governs chamber sport should press to field, and her thy will enjoined my lance to hurt. But he whose power hath right in arms, I knew in person here, besides the Cyprian deity, and therefore did forbear, and here have gathered in retreat these other Greeks you see, with note and reverence of your charge. My dearest mind, said she, what then was fit is changed. 'Tis true, Mars hath just rule in war, but my dearest mind, said she, what then was fit is changed. 'Tis true, Mars hath just rule in war, but just war. Otherwise he raves, not fights. He's altered far. He vowed to Juno and myself that his aid should be used against the Trojans, whom it guards, and therein he should be used against the Trojans, whom it guards. And therein he abused his rule in arms, infringed his word, and made his war unjust. He is inconsistent, impious, mad. Resolve then, firmly trust my aid of thee. Against his worst, or any deity. Add scourge to thy free horse, charge home, he fights perfidiously. This said, as that brave king, her knight, with his horse-gilding friend, were set before the chariot, for sign he should descend, that she might serve for wagoness. She plucked the wagoner back, and up into his seat she mounts. The beechen tree did crack beneath the burthen, and good cause, it bore so huge a thing, a goddess so replete with power, and such a puissant king. I think it's puissant, but I want to confirm. Puissant. There you go. That's why you check. Okay. It bore so huge a thing, a goddess so replete with power, and such a puissant king. So replete with power, and such a puissant king. She snatched the scourge up and the reins, and shut her heavenly look in hell's vast helm from Mars's eyes, and full career from Mars's eyes, and full career she took at him, who then had newly slain the mighty Periphas, renowned son to Ocasius, and far the strongest was of all the Aetolians. Ocasius. She took at him, who then had newly slain the mighty Periphas, renowned son to Ocasius. Renowned son to Ocasius, and far the strongest was of all the Aetolians. In hell's vast helm from Mars's eyes, and full career she took at him. And full career she took at him, who then had newly slain the mighty Periphas, renowned son to Ocasius, and far the strongest was of all the Aetolians, to whose spoil the bloody god was run. But when this man-plague saw the approach of godlike Tydeus' son, he let mighty Periphas, godlike Tydeus' son, he let his mighty Periphas lie, and in full charge he ran at mighty Periphas lie, and in full charge he ran at Diomed, and he at him, at Diomed, and he at him. Both near the god began, and thirsty of his blood, he throws a brazen lance that bears full on the breast of Diomed, above the reins and gears. But Pallas took it on her hand, and struck the eager lance beneath the chariot. Then the knight of Pallas doth advance, and cast a javelin off at Mars. Minerva set it on, that where his arming girdle girt, his belly grazed upon. His arming girdle girt, his belly grazed upon, just at the rim, and wrenched the flesh. The lance again he got, but left the wound the lance again he got, but left the wound that stung him so. The lance again he got, but left the wound that stung him so, and laid out such a throat as if 9,000 or 10,000 men had brayed out all their breaths. That stung him so, he laid out such a throat as if 9,000 or 10,000 men had brayed out all their breaths in one confusion, having felt as many sudden deaths. The roar made both the hosts amazed. Up flew the god to heaven, and with him was through all the air as black a tincture driven to Diomed's eyes, as when the earth hath choked to Diomed's eyes, as when the earth half choked with smoking heat of gloomy clouds that stifle men, and pitchy tempest threat, ushered with gloomy clouds that stifle men, smoking heat of gloomy clouds that stifle men, and pitchy tempest threat, ushered with horrid gusts of wind, with such black vapors plumed. Ushered with horrid gusts of wind. With such black vapors plumed, Mars flew to Olympus and broad heaven, and there his place resumed. Sadly he went and sat by Jove. Resumed. Sadly he went and sat by Jove, showed his immortal blood that from a mortal man made wound poured such an impious flood, and weeping poured out these complaints. I'm going to write in impious actually, because Otherwise, I would pronounce it impious. But I think both are correct. I don't know. But it's clear that based on the rhyming scheme, Chapman wants it to be impious. All right. An impious flood, and weeping out, impious flood, and weeping poured out these complaints. I forgot to actually bring in the reference file. Okay, Mars. One, two, three. "O Priam's sons," said he, "how long the slaughter of your men?" Impious flood, and weeping poured out these complaints. And weeping poured out these complaints. And weeping poured out these complaints. "O Father, storm'st thou not to see us take these wrongs from men? Extreme griefs we have got, even by our own deep counsels, held for gratifying them. And thou, our council's president, concludest in this extreme of fighting ever, being ruled by one that thou hast bred, one never well. Of being ruled by one that thou hast bred, one never well but doing ill, a girl so full of head that though all other gods obey, her mad moods must command by thy indulgence, nor by word nor any touch of hand correcting her. Thy reason is she is a spark of thee, and therefore she may kindle rage in men 'gainst gods, and she may make men 'gainst gods, and she may make men hurt gods, and those gods that are besides thy seed. First in the palms hit high thy seed. First in the palms hit Cyprides. First in the palms hit Cyprides. Then runs the impious Cyprides. Then runs the impious deed on my hurt person. And could life give way to death in me, my hurt person, and could life give way to death in me, or had my feet not fetched me off, heaps of mortality had kept me consort. Heaps of mortality had kept me consort. Jupiter, with a contracted bow. Jupiter, with a contracted Jupiter, with a contracted brow, thus answered Mars. Jupiter. And my power to give it act, approve how vain her strife is. To thy power mine evident. With a contracted brow, thus answered Mars. Thou many minds, inconstant changeling thou, sit not complaining thus by me, who most of all the gods inhabiting the starry hill I hate, no periods being set to thy contentions, brawls, fights, and pitching fields. Just of thy mother Juno's moods, stiff-necked and never yields, though I correct her still and chide, nor can forbear offense, though to her son. and chide, nor can forbear offense, though to her son. This wound I know tastes of her insolence, but I will prove more natural. Thou shalt be cured, because thou comest of me. But hadst thou been so cross to sacred laws, being born to any other god, thou hadst been thrown from heaven long since. But I will prove more natural. Thou shalt be cured, because thou comest of me. But hadst thou been so cross to sacred laws, being born to any other god, thou hadst been thrown from heaven long since, as low as Tartarus beneath the giants driven. This said, he gave his wound in charge to Paean, who applied such sovereign medicines that as soon the pain was qualified, and he recured, as nourishing milk when runnet is put in, runs all in heaps of tough thick curd, though in his nature thin, even so soon his wound's parted sides ran close in his recure. For he, all deathless, could not long the parts of death endure. For he, all deathless, could not long the parts of death endure. Then Hebe bathed, and put on him fresh garments, and he sate exulting by his sire again, in top of all his state. So having from the spoils of men made his desired remove, Juno and Pallas reascend the starry court of Jove. So having from the spoils of men made his desired remove, Juno and Pallas reascend the starry court of Jove. The starry court of Jove. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's book 5. Now we would move on to book 6, which I already prepped the pronunciation guide for. Okay, let's bring that in. Good. And so we're going to call this book 5 and also book 6. Okay, now I have to mark this on my sheet here. Got to stay organized when you're doing an audiobook because there's a lot of footage and a lot of content. So it's very easy to lose track of stuff. Okay. So now we have book 6. And book 6 starts around 37 minutes. Good. And round the seat of Jove, Pallas and Juno round the seat of Jove. Book 6. Book 6. Argument. Argument. The gods now leaving an indifferent field, the Greeks prevail, the slaughtered Trojans yield. Hector, by Helena's advice, retires in haste to Troy, and Hecuba desires to pray Minerva to remove from fight the son of Tydeus, her affected knight, and vow to her for favor of such price 12 oxen should be slain in sacrifice. In mean space Glaucus and Tydides meet, and either other with remembrance greet of old love twixt their fathers, which inclines their hearts to friendship, who change arms for signs of a continued love for either's life. Hector in his return meets with his wife, and taking in his armed hands his son, he prophesies the fall of Iliad. Another argument. In Zeta, Hector prophesies. Prays for his son, wills sacrifice. In Zeta, Hector prophesies, prays for his son, wills sacrifice. Book 6. Book 6. Book 6. The stern fight, freed of all the gods, conquest with doubtful wings flew on their lances. Every way the restless field she flings, betwixt the floods of Simois and Xanthus, that confined all their affairs at Ilion, and round about them shined. The first that weighed down all the field of one particular side was Ajax, son of Telamon, who like a bulwark plied the Greeks' protection, and of Troy the knotty orders brake, held out a light to all the rest, and showed them how to make way to their conquest. He did wound the strongest man of Thrace, the tallest and the biggest set, Eusorbian Achames. Eusorbian. I would pronounce him as Achames, but I think it's an acceptable force of the rhyme to say Achames. He did wound the strongest man of Thrace, the tallest and the biggest set, Eusorbian Achames. His lance fell on his casqued plume's top. In stooping. The fell head drave through his forehead to his jaws. Eusorbian Achames. His lance fell on his casque's plumed top in stooping. The fell head drave through his forehead to his jaws. His eyes night shadowed. Tydides slew Teuthranides Axilius, that did dwell in fair Arisba's well-built. Arisba. Axilus. Teuthranides. Calesius. Opheltius. Dresus. Eyes night shadowed. Tydides slew to Thranides Axillus. Shadowed. Tydides slew to Thranides Axillus, that did dwell in fair Arisba's well-built. That did dwell in fair Arisba's well-built. In fair Arisba's well-built towers. In fair Arisba's well-built towers. In fair Arisba's well-built towers. He had a wealth. In fair Arisba's well-built towers. He had of wealth a well, and yet was kind and bountiful. He would a traveller pray to be his guest. His friendly house stood on the broad highway, in which all sorts nobly used. Yet none of them would stand twixt him and death, but both himself and he that had command of his fair horse Calesius fell lifeless on the ground. Euryalus, Opheltius, and Dresus dead did wound. Nor ended there his fiery course, which he again begins, and ran to it successfully upon a pair of twins, Aesopus and bold Pedasus, whom good Bucolion, that first called father, though base-born, renowned Laomedon, on Neus Arborea got. Neus? I do not have Arborea. All right. Let's look this up. Arborea. Okay. Oh, wait a second. A Barbaria. I did have it. My cursor was actually selected on it in the pronunciation guide. I was saying Arborea. Okay, where was that? Aeneas, a Barbaria got, a nymph that as she fed. Okay. Mecistiades. All right, this might actually want a. It's been a while, but we might want to do a phonetic guide for one of these parts here. Polypedes. We know how that's a stylus. Ulysses. Percosius. Yep. Aretan. Aretaean. Oops. Aretaean. Ablaris. Elatus. Yeah, I don't think we would need to like for book 2, I actually had to off camera like just prepare a bunch of these guides because there's so many rattled off names, but otherwise there's not that many instances like that. Maybe here in book 20 and when Patroclus book 16, but it won't ever be as much as book 2 was again. Lightus, I don't love that. The great hero Iliad stayed Phyllis in flight. Well, I guess that's... Okay, good. Let's save this. Phonetic passages. Book 6-1. Okay. Upon a pair of twins, Aesopus and bold Pedasus, whom good Bucolion, that first called father, though baseborn, renowned whom good Bucolion, that first called father, though baseborn, renowned Laomedon, on Neus renowned Laomedon, on Neus a Barbaria got, a nymph that, as she fed her curled flocks, Bucolion wooed, and mixed in love and bed. Both these were spoiled of arms and life by Mecistiades. Then Polypoetes for stern death Astylus did seize. Ulysses slew Percosius, Teucer a Rhetean. Hold on, where did I put that? Okay. Ulysses slew Percosius, Teucer a Rhetean, Antilochus, old Nestor's joy, Ablerus did seize. Ulysses slew Percosius, Teucer a Rhetean, Antilochus, old Nestor's joy, Ablerus, the great son of Atreus and king of men, Elatus, whose abode he held at Upper Pedasus, where Satnius river flowed. The great hero Iliad stayed Phyllis in flight. The great hero Iliad stayed Phyllis in flight from further life. Eurypylus Melanthius reft of light. Stayed Phyllis in flight from further life. Eurypylus Melanthius reft of light. The brother to the king of men, Adrestus, took alive. Adrestus. Melanthius reft of light. The brother to the king of men, of light. The brother to the king of men, Adrestus took alive. The brother to the king of men, Adrestus took alive, whose horse affrighted with the flight, their driver now did drive amongst the low ground tamarisk trees, and at an arm of one the chariot in the draught tree brake, the horse brake loose, and run the same way other flyers fled, contending all to town. Himself close at the chariot wheel upon his face was thrown, and there lay flat, rolled up in dust. Atrides inwards drave, and holding at his breast his lance, Adrestus sought to save his head by losing of his feet, and trusting to his knees, on which the same parts of the king he hugs, and offers fees of worthy value for his life, and thus pleads their receipt. Take me alive. Let's give him a note for his voice, although he's not going to appear again. But we have to know that at least what it sounds like in case we use somebody else's sounds like his. address this, and pleads of their receipt, offers fees of worthy value for his life, and thus pleads their receipt. Take me alive, O Atreus' son, and take a worthy weight of brass, elaborate iron, and gold. A heap of precious things are in my father's ranches hid, which, when your servant brings news of my safety to his ears, he largely will divide with your rare of worthy weight of brass, elaborate iron, and gold. A heap of precious things are in my father's riches hid, which, when your servant brings news of my safety to his ears, he largely will divide with your rare bounties. Atreus' son thought this the better side, and meant to take it, being about to send him safe to fleet, which when far off his brother saw, he winged his royal feet, and came in threatening, crying out, O soft heart, what's the cause thou sparest these men thus? Have not they observed these gentle laws of mild humanity to thee, with mighty argument? Why, thou shouldst deal thus in thy house, and with all precedent of honored guest rights entertained. Not one of them shall fly a bitter end for it from heaven. And much less dotingly scape our revengeful fingers. All, even the infant in the womb shall taste of what they merited, and have no other tomb than raised Iliad, nor their race have more fruit than the dust. Zid Iliad, nor their race have more fruit than the dust. This just cause turned his brother's mind, who violently thrust the prisoner from him, in whose guts the king of men impressed his ashen lance, which, pitching down his foot upon the breast of him that upwards fell, he drew. Then Nestor spake to all. Nestor. O gods, our Greek earth will be drowned in just tears, rapeful Troy. Then Nestor spake to all. O friends and household men of Mars, let not your pursuit fall with those ye fell, spake to all. O friends and household men of Mars, let not your pursuit fall with those ye fell for present spoil, nor like the king of men let any scape unfelled. But on, dispatch them all, and then ye shall have time enough for spoil. This made so strong their chase that all the Trojans had been housed and never turned a face, had not the Priamist Helenus, an augur of Helenus, an augur most of name, willed Hector and Aeneas thus. I don't think I have a Helenus voice. We do not have a Helenus voice. Okay, 58. Hector, Anchises' fame. Most of name willed Hector and Aeneas thus. Hector, Anchises' fame, since on your shoulders with good cause, willed Hector and Aeneas thus. Hector, Anchises' fame, since on your shoulders with good cause the weighty burden lies of Troy and Lycia, being both of noblest faculties for counsel, strength of hand, and apt to take it. Strength of hand and apt to take chance at her best in every turn she makes. Stand fast and suffer not the rest, by any way searched out for scape, to come within the ports, lest fled into their wives' kind arms, they there be made the sports of the pursuing enemy. Exhort and force your bands to turn their faces, and while we employ our ventured hands, though in a hard condition, to make the other stay, Hector, go thou to Iliad, and our queen mother pray to take the richest robe she hath. Go thou to Iliad, and our queen mother pray to take the richest robe she hath, the same that's chiefly dear to her court fancy, with which gem, assembling more to her of Troy's chief matrons, let all go, for fear of all our fates, to Pallas' temple, take the key, unlock the heavy gates, enter and reach the highest tower where her palladium stands, and on it put the precious veil with pure and reverent hands, and vow to her, besides the gift, a sacrificing stroke of 12 fat heifers of a year, that never felt the yoke, most answering to her maiden state, if she will pity us. That never felt the yoke, most answering to her maiden state, if she will pity us. Our town, our wives, our youngest joys, and him that plagues them thus, take from the conflict, Diomed, that fury in a fight, that true son of great Tydeus, that cunning lord of flight, whom I esteem the strongest Greek, for we have never fled Achilles, that is prince of men. And whom a goddess bred, like him. His fury flies so high, and all men's wraths commands. Hector intends his brother's will, but first through all the bands he made quick away, encouraging, and all to fear afraid, all turned their heads, and made Greece turn. Slaughter stood still dismayed on their parts, for they thought some god fallen from the vault of stars was rushed into the Iliad's aid. They made such dreadful wars. Fallen from the vault of stars was rushed into the Iliad's aid. They made such dreadful wars. Thus Hector, toiling in the waves and thrusting back the flood of his ebbed forces, thus takes leave. Trojans and hardy Greeks, thus takes leave. So now takes leave. So now runs your blood. Takes leave. So now runs your blood in his right current. Forward now, Trojans and far-called friends. So now runs your blood in his right current. Forwards now, Trojans and far-called friends, a while hold out. far-called friends. A while hold out, till for success to this your brave amends. Till for success to this your brave amends, I haste to Ilion, and procure our counselors and wives, to pray and offer hecatombs for their states in our lives. Hecatombs, offer hecatombs for their states in our lives. Then fair-helmed Hector turned to Troy, and as he trode the field, the black bull's hide that at his back he wore about his shield, in the extreme circumference, was with his gait so rocked, that being large, it both at once his neck and ankles knocked. And now betwixt the hosts were met Hippolochus brave, and now his neck and ankles knocked. And now, betwixt the hosts, were met Hippolochus' brave son, Glaucus, who in his very look hope of some wonder won, and little Tydeus' mighty heir, who seeing such a man offer the field for usual blows with wondrous words began. Diomedes. And we do not have a Glaucus voice. I'll probably try to make it possibly similar to Sarpedon's. I guess Pandarus also comes from Lycia, but my understanding is that it's a different area of Lycia. Sarpedon and Glaucus are from the same area. So let's pull in Sarpedon. Hector, where is thy unthankful vaunt? Well, we don't need that yet, actually. We need Diomedes. Suppress thine anger's powers, good friend, and hear why I refrained. Thou seest, for usual blows, with wondrous words began. What art thou, strongest of mortal men, that put so far before, whom these fights never showed mine eyes? They have been evermore sons of unhappy parents, born. They have been evermore sons of unhappy parents, born, that came within the length of this Minerva-guided lance, and durst close with the strength that she inspires in me. If heaven be thy divine abode, and thou a deity thus informed, no more with any god will I change lances. The strong son of Dryas did not live long. After such a conflict dared, who godlessly did drive Nicias nurses. Nicias. Press thine anger's powers, good friend, who godlessly did drive Nicias nurses through the hill, and Nicias nurses through the hill made sacred to his name, and called Nicias. Nicias, okay. I don't think that should be the same pronunciation. I'm going to say that this one would be Nicias, and the hill would be called Nicias. Who godlessly did drive long after such a conflict dared, who godlessly did drive Nicaeus horses, godlessly did drive Nicaeus nurses through the hill, made sacred to his name, and called Nicias. His name, and called Nicias. With a goad he punched each furious dame, and made them every one cast down their green and leafy spears. Thus the homicide Lycurgus did, and those ungodly fears he put the froze in, seized their god, even Bacchus he did drive from Nicaea. Even Bacchus he did drive from his Nicaeus who was faint, did drive from his Nicaeus who was fain with huge exclaims to dive into the ocean. Thetis there in her bright bosom took the flying deity, who so feared Lycurgus' threats he shook, for which the freely giving gods so highly were incensed that Saturn's great son took him blind, that Saturn's great son struck him blind, and with his life dispensed but small time after. Blind, and with his life dispensed but small time after. All because the immortals loved him not, nor loved him since he strived with them, and his end hath begot fear in strived with them, and his end hath begot fear in my powers to fight with heaven. But if the fruits of earth nourish thy body, and thy life be of our human birth, come near, that thou mayst soon arrive on that life-bounding shore to which I see thee. That thou mayst soon arrive on that life-bounding shore to which I see thee hoist such sail. Why dost thou so explore? 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 Hoist such sail. Why dost thou so explore? Said Glaucus, of what race I am, when like the race of leaves the race of man is. The race of leaves the race of man is, that deserves no question, nor receives my being any other breath. The wind in autumn strows the earth with old leaves. The wind in autumn strows the earth. The wind in autumn strows the earth with old leaves. Then the spring the wood with new endows. And so death endows. And the wind in autumn strows the earth with old leaves. Then the spring with woods. Then the spring the woods. Then the spring the woods with new endows. Then the spring the woods with new endows. And so death scatters men on earth. So life puts out again. Man's leafy issue. Man's leafy issue. But my race, if like the course of men thou seekst to it, in the course of men thou seekst in more particular terms, 'tis this, to many known. In midst of Argos, nurse of horse, there stands a walled town, Ephyra, where the mansion house of Sisyphus did stand, of Sisyphus Iolides, most wise of all the land. The reason, by the way, that we would be doing an accent for Glaucus and Sarpedon is because they're the most vocal of the foreign powers assisting Troy. In reality, every Trojan contingent should have a heavy accent differentiated from each other, because that's a thing that's made a point of in the story, is that Troy is comprised of people from, they don't even speak the same language as each other, but somehow in the constraints of the story they do talk to each other. But I think at least for the Lycian contingent, it makes sense for them to have an accent. Okay, Ephira. Ephire. Ephire. I'm going to say Ephire. Iolides. I just want to check Sarpedon. Hector. Yeah, it's different enough. A walled town. In midst of Argos, nurse of horse, there stands a walled town, Ephyra. If it was in Greek, it would be more like... Let's check the Greek on... I want to say Ephira, but I had written Ephire. Epure. Epure. But you wouldn't put the stress on the last syllable in English. Epure. I think I would say more like Ephira. There stands a walled town, Ephira, where the mansion house of Sisyphus did stand, of Sisyphus Iolides, most wise of all the land. Glaucus was son to him, and he begat Bellerophon, whose body heaven endued with strength, and put a beauty on, exceeding lovely. Pretis, yet his cause of love, exceeding lovely. Pretis, yet his cause of love did hate, and banished him the town. He ruled the Argive state. The virtue of the one Jove placed beneath the other's power. Argive state. The virtue of the one Jove placed beneath the other's power. His exile grew, since he denied to be the power. Argive state. The virtue of the one Jove placed beneath the other's power. His exile grew, since he denied to be the paramour of fair Antea, Pretis' wife, who felt a raging fire of secret love to him. But he, whom wisdom did inspire, as well as prudence, one of them advising him to shun the danger of a princess' love, the other did not run within the danger of the gods, the act being simply ill. Within the danger of the gods, the act being simply ill, still entertaining thoughts divine, subdued the earthly still. She, ruled by neither of her wits, preferred her lust to both, and, false to Pretis, would seem true with this abhorred untruth. Pretis, or die thyself, said she, or let Bellerophon die. He urged dishonor to thy bed, which since I did deny, he thought his violence should grant, and sought thy shame by force. The king, incensed with her report, resolved upon her course, but doubted how it should be run. He shunned his death direct, holding away so near not safe, and plotted the effect by sending him with letters sealed that opened touch his life to runes. Rayons. Opened touch his life to Rheans, king of Lycia, and father to his wife. He went, and happily he went. He went, and happily he went. The gods walked all his way. And being arrived in Lycia, where Xanthus doth display the silver ensigns of his waves, the king of that broad land received him with a wondrous free and honourable hand. 9 days he feasted him, and killed an ox in every day, in thankful sacrifice to heaven, for his fair guest, whose stay with rosy fingers brought the world the 10th well-welcomed morn. And killed an ox in every day, in thankful sacrifice to heaven for his fair guest, whose stay with rosy fingers brought the world the 10th well-welcomed morn. The 10th well-welcomed morn. And then the king did move to see the letters he had borne from his loved son-in-law, which seen he wrought thus their contents. Chimera, the invincible, he sent him to convince, sprung from no man, but mere divine, a lion's shape before, behind a dragon's, in the midst a goat's shagged form she bore. And flames of deadly fervency flew from her breath and eyes. Yet her he slew. His confidence in sacred prodigies rendered him victor. Then he gave his second conquest way against the famous Ptolemy, when, he himself would say, reporting it, he entered on a passing vigorous fight. His third huge labour he approved against a woman's spite, that filled a field of Amazons. He overcame them all. Then they set on him sly deceit, when force had such a fall, an ambush of the strongest men that spacious Lycia bred was lodged for him, whom he lodged sure. Spacious Lycia bred was lodged for him, whom he lodged sure. They never raised a head. His deeds, thus showing him derived from some celestial race, the king detained, and made amends with doing him the grace of his fair daughter's princely gift, and with her for a dower gave half his kingdom. And to this the Lycians on did pour more than was given to any king. A goodly planted field, in some parts thick of groves and woods, the rest rich crops did yield. This field the Lycians furtively of future wanderings there did yield. This field the Lycians futurely of future wanderings there, and other errors of their prince in the unhappy rear of his sad life, the errant called. The princess brought him forth 3 children, whose ends grieved him more, the more they were of worth. Isander were of worth, the more they were of worth. Isander and Hippolochus and fair Laodame, with whom even Jupiter himself left heaven. With whom even Jupiter himself left heaven itself to lie, and had by her the man-at-arms Sarpedon, called divine. The gods then left him, lest a man should in their glory shine, and set against him. For his son Isandrus, in a strife against the valiant Salami, Mars reft of light and life. Laodamia, being envied of all the goddesses, the golden bridle-handling queen, the maiden patroness, being envied of all the goddesses, the golden bridle-handling queen, the maiden patroness, slew with an arrow. And for this he wandered evermore, alone through his Ilian field, and fed upon the core of his sad bosom, flying all the loath consorts of men. Yet had he one survived to him of these Yet had he one survived to him of those 3 children, Hippolochus, the root of me, who sent me here with charge that I should always bear me well, and my deserts enlarge beyond the vulgar, lest I shamed my race that far excelled all that Ephyra's famous towers or ample Lycia held. This is my stock, and this am I. This cheered Tydides' heart, who pitched his spear down, leaned, and talked in this affectionate part. Suppress thine anger's powers, good friend. This affectionate part. Certes, in thy great ancestor, and in mine own, thou art a guest of mine, right ancient. King Aeneas 20 days detained with feasts Bellerophon, whom all the world did praise, betwixt whom mutual gifts were given. My grandsire gave to thine a girdle of Phoenician work, empurpled wondrous fine. Thine gave a 2-necked jug of gold, which, though I use not here, yet still it is my gem at home. But if our fathers were familiar, or each other knew, gem at home. But if our fathers were familiar, or each other knew, I know not, since my sire left me as a child at siege of Thebes, where he left his life's fire. But let us prove our grandsire's sons, and be each other's guests. To Lycia when I come, do thou receive thy friend with feasts. Peloponnesus and the like Peloponnesus with the like shall thy wished presence greet. Mean space shun we each other here, though in the press we meet. There are enow of Troy beside, and men enough renowned to my right powers, whomever heaven shall let by lance to my renowned to right my powers, whomever heaven shall let my lance confound. So there are of Greeks for thee, kill who thou canst. And now, for sign of amity twixt us, and that all these may know, we glory in the auspicious rites our grandsires did commend. Change we of arms before them all. From horse then both descend. Join hands, give faith, and take. And then did Jupiter elate the mind of Glaucus, who, to show his reverence to the state of virtue in his grandsire's heart, and gratulate beside the offer of so great a friend, exchanged in that good pride curates of gold for those of brass that did on Diomed shine, one of 100 oxen's price, the other but of 9. By this had Hector reached the ports of Sia and the towers, but of 9. By this had Hector reached the ports of Sia and the towers. About him flocked the wives of Troy, the children paramours, the children and the towers. The wives of Troy, the children paramours, inquiring how their husbands did, their fathers, brothers' loves. He stood not brothers' loves. He stood not then to answer them, but said, It now behoves you should all go to Trojans and hardy Greeks, but said, It now behoves you should all go to implore the aid of heaven in a distress of great effect, and imminent. Then hasted he access to Priam's goodly builded court, which round about was run with walking porches, galleries, to keep off rain and sun, with to Priam's goodly builded court, which round about was run with walking porches, galleries, to keep off rain and sun. Within of one side, on a roue of sundry-colored stones, 50 fair lodgings were built out for Priam's 50 sons, and as 50 sons, and for as fair a sort of their wives, and in the opposite view 12 lodgings of like stone, like height. 12 lodgings of like stone, like height, were likewise built a roue, where, with their fair and virtuous wives, 12 princes, sons-in-law to honorable Priam lay. And here met Hecuba, the loving mother, her great son, and with her needs must be the fairest of her female race, the bright Laodice. The queen gripped hard her Hector's hand and said, Hecuba. We wouldn't have a Hecuba yet. We're now at 1:31:30. Hecuba. Gripped hard her Hector's hand and said, O worthiest son, and said, O worthiest son, why leavest thou field? Is it not because the cursed nation afflict our countrymen and friends? They are their moans that move thy mind to come and lift thy hands in his high tower to Jove. But stay a little, that myself may fetch our sweetest wine, to offer first to Jupiter, then that these joints of thine may be refreshed, for, woe is me, how thou art toiled and spent. Thou for our city's general state, thou for our friends far sent, must now the press of fight endure, now solitude to call upon the name of Jupiter, thou only for us all. Now solitude to call upon the name of Jupiter, thou only for us all. But wine will something comfort. Now solitude to call upon the name of Jupiter, thou only for us all. But wine will something comfort thee, for to a man dismayed with careful spirits, or too much with labor overlaid, wine brings much rescue. For to a man dismayed with careful spirits, or too much with labor overlaid, wine brings much rescue, strengthening much the body and the mind. The great helm mover thus received the authoress of his kind. Trojans and hardy Greeks. The great helm mover thus received the authoress of his kind. My royal mother, bring no wine, lest rather it impair than help my strength. And make my mind forgetful of the affair committed to it. And to pour it out in sacrifice, I fear, with unwashed hands to serve the pure-lived deities. Nor is it lawful, thus imbrued with blood and dust, to prove the will of heaven, or offer vows to cloud-compelling Jove. I only come to use your pains, assembling other dames, matrons, and women honored most, with high and virtuous names, with wine and odors, and a robe most ample, most of price. Assembling other dames, matrons, and women honored most, with high and virtuous names, with wine and odors, and a robe most ample, most of price, and which is dearest in your love, to offer sacrifice in Pallas' temple, and put the precious robe ye bear on her palladium, vowing all 12 oxen of a year, whose necks were never wrung with yoke, shall pay her grace their lives, if she will pity our siege town, pity ourselves, our wives, pity our children, and remove from sacred Ilion the dreadful soldier Diomed, And when yourselves are gone about this work, myself I will go to call into the field, if he will hear me, Helen's love, whom would the earth, will call into the field, if he will hear me, Helen's love, whom would the earth would yield, and headlong take into her gulf, even quick before mine eyes, for then my heart, I hope, would cast her load of miseries. Born for the plague he hath been born, and bred to the deface by great Olympius of Troy, our sire, and all our race. And bred to the deface by great Olympius of Troy, our sire, and all our race. This said, grave Hecuba went home, and sent her maids about to bid the matrons. She herself descended, and searched out, within a place that breathed perfumes, the richest robe she had, which lay with many rich ones more, most curiously made by women of Cydonia. With many rich ones more, most curiously made by she had, with which the richest robe she had, which lay with many rich ones more, most curiously made by women of Cydonia. Which Paris brought from thence, sailing the broad sea, when he made the voyage of offence, in which he brought home Helena. That robe transferred so far, that was the undermost she took. It glittered like a star, and with it went she to the fane, with many ladies more, amongst whom fair-cheeked Theano unlocked the folded door. Chaste Theano, Antenor's wife, Chryseis, amongst whom fair-cheeked Theano unlocked the folded door. Chaste Theano, Antenor's wife, and of Chryseis' race, sister to Hecuba, both born to that great king of Thrace. Her the Ilians made Minerva's priest, and her they followed all, up to the temple's highest tower, where on their knees they fall, lift up their hands, and fill the fane with ladies' piteous cries. Then lovely Theano took the veil, and with it she implies the great Palladium, praying thus. All right, we need a Theano voice. 39. Oops. Theano. Praying thus. Goddess of most renown. Praying thus. Goddess of most renown in all the heaven of the great Palladium, praying thus. Goddess of most renown, in all the heaven of goddesses, great guardian of our town, Reverend Minerva, break the lance of Diomed, cease his grace, give him to fall in shameful flight, headlong and on his face, before our ports of Ilion, that instantly we may 12 unyoked oxen of a year in this thy temple slay, to thy sole honor. Take their bloods and banish our offense. Accept Troy's zeal, her wives, and save. Accept Troy's zeal, her wives, and save our infants' innocence. She prayed, but Pallas would not grant. Mean space was not grant. Mean space was Hector come, where Alexander's lodgings were, that many a goodly room had built them. Many a goodly room had built in them by architects of Troy's most curious sort, and were no lodgings but a house, nor no house but a court. And were no lodgings but a house, nor no house but a court, or had all these contained in them, and all within a tower, next Hector's, and all with contained in them, and all within a tower, next Hector's lodgings and the king's. The loved of heaven's chief power Hector here entertained. In his hand a goodly lance he bore, 10 cubits long. The brazen head went shining in before, helped with a burnished ring of gold. He found his brother then amongst the women, yet prepared to go amongst the men, for in their chamber he was set, trimming his arms, his shield, his curets, and was trying how his crooked bow would yield to his straight arms. Amongst her maids was set the Argive queen, commanding them in choicest works. When Hector's eye had seen his brother thus accompanied, and that he could not choicest works. When Hector's eye had seen his brother thus accompanied, and that he could not bear the very touching of his arms, but where the women were, and when the time so needed men, right cunningly he chid, that he might do it bitterly, his cowardice he hid, that simply made him so retired beneath an anger feigned in him by Hector for the late for the hate the citizens sustained against him, for the foil he took in their cause, and again for all the general foils in his, So Hector seems to plain of his wrath to them, to their hate, and not his cowardice, and there his cowardice, and that were it sheltered him, his cowardice, as that were it sheltered him in his effeminacies, and kept him in that dangerous time from their fit aid in fight, and kept him in that dangerous time from their his cowardice, and that were it, and wrath to them, to their hate, and not his cowardice, and that were it that sheltered him in his effeminacies, and kept him in that dangerous time from their fit aid in fight, from which he chid thus. In his effeminacies, and kept him in that dangerous time from their fit aid in fight, from which he chid thus. Wretched man, so timeless is thy spite, that 'tis not honest, and their hate, that 'tis not honest, and their hate is just, against which it bends. War burns about the town for thee. For thee, our slaughtered friends besiege Troy with their carcasses, on whose heaps our high walls are overlooked by enemies. The sad sounds of their falls without are echoed with the cries of wives and babes within, and all for thee. And yet for them thy honor cannot win. And yet for them thy honor cannot win head of thine anger. Thou shouldst need no spirit to stir up thine, but thine should set the rest on fire, and with a rage divine chastise impartially the best that impiously forbears. Come forth, lest thy fair towers and Troy be burned about thine ears. Paris acknowledged as before all just that Hector spake, allowing justice, though it were for his injustice' sake. And where his brother put a wrath upon him by his art, he takes it for his honor's sake, as sprung out of his heart, and rather would have anger seem his fault than cowardice. And thus he answered. Because thy sharp reproof is out of justice given. Anger seem his fault than cowardice. And thus he answered. Since with right you joined check. Going back in the chronology here to earlier, before Hector talks to Paris in this scene. The very touching of his arms, but where the women were, and when the time so needed men, right cunningly he chid. That he might do it bitterly, his cowardice he hid, that simply made him so retired, beneath an anger feigned in him by Hector. Beneath an anger feigned in him by Hector, for the hate the citizens sustained against him, for the foil he took in their cause, and again for all their general foils in his. So Hector seems to plain of his wrath to them, to their hate, and not his cowardice, as that were it that sheltered him in his effeminacies, and kept him in that dangerous time from their fit aid in fight, for which he chid thus. for which he chid thus. Okay, going back to the part that we were in previously, which is when Paris replies to Hector. Sprung out of his heart, and rather would have anger seem his fault than cowardice. And thus he answered, because thy sharp reproof. And thus he answered, since with right you joined check with advice, and I hear you, give equal ear, it is not any spleen against the town, as you conceive, that makes me so unseen, but sorrow for it, which to ease and by discourse digest within myself, I live so close. And yet, since men might rest my sad retreat, like you, my wife, her... And yet, since men might rest my sad retreat, like you, my wife, with her advice inclined, this my addression to the field, which was mine own free mind, as well as the instance of her words. Mine own free mind, as well as the instance of her words. For though the foil were mine, conquest brings forth her wreaths by turns. Stay then this haste of thine, but till I arm, and I am made a consort for thee straight. Or go, I'll overtake thy haste. Straight. Or go, I'll overtake thy haste. Helen stood at receipt, and took up all great Hector's powers to attend her heavy words, by which had Paris no reply. Thus vent her grief affords. Helen. Most reverend father-in-law, by which had Paris no reply. This Varus no reply. This no reply. This vent her grief affords. Brother, if I may call you so, that had been better born a dog than such a horrid dame as all men curse and scorn, a mischief maker, a man plague. Oh, would to God the day that first gave light to me had been a whirlwind in my way, and borne me to some desert hill, or hid me in the rage of earth's most far resounding seas, ere I should thus engage the dear lives of so many friends. Yet, since the gods have been helpless foreseers of my plagues, they might have likewise seen that he they put in yoke with me to bear out their award had been a man of much more spirit, or had noblier dared to shield mine honor with this deed, or with his mind had known much better the upbraids of men, that so he might have shown more like a man some sense of grief for both my shame and his. But he is senseless, nor conceives what any manhood is, nor now, nor ever after will, and therefore hangs, I fear, a plague ever after will, and therefore hangs, I fear, a plague above him. But come near, good brother, rest you here, who of the world of men stands charged with most unrest for me, vile wretch, and for my lover's wrong. who of the world of men stands charged with most unrest for me, vile wretch, and for my lover's wrong, on whom a destiny so bitter is imposed by Jove, that all succeeding times will put to our unended shames in all men's mouths our crimes. In all men's mouths our crimes. Unended shames, in all men's mouths our crimes. He answered, Helen, do not seek to make me sit with thee. I must not stay, though well I know thy honored love of me. My mind calls forth to aid our friends, in whom my absence breeds longings to see me, for whose sakes importune thou to deeds this man by all means, that your care may make his own make haste and meet me in the open town, that all may see at last he minds his lover. I myself will now go home and see my household, my dear wife and son, that little hope of me. I myself will now go home and see my household, my dear wife and son, that little hope of me. For, sister, 'tis without my skill if I shall evermore return and see them, or to earth her right in me restore. The gods may stoop me by the Greeks. Her right in me restore. The gods may stoop me by the Greeks. This said, he went to see the virtuous princess. His true wife, white-armed Andromache. She with her infant son and maid was climbed the tower about the sight of him that sought for her, weeping and crying out Hector. About the sight of him that sought for her, weeping and crying out Hector, not finding her at home, was going forth retired, stood in the gate, her woman called, and curiously inquired where she was gone. Bade tell him true, if she were gone to see his sisters or his brothers' wives, or whether she should be at temple with the other dames to implore Minerva's ruth. Should be at temple with the other dames to implore Minerva's ruth. Her woman answered, since he asked and urged so much the truth was, she was neither gone to see his brothers' wives, his sisters, nor to implore the ruth of Pallas on their lives. To see his brothers' wives, his sisters, nor to implore the ruth of Pallas on their lives. But she, advertised of the bane of Troy suffered. Advertised of the bane Troy suffered, and how vast conquest had made herself for Greece, like one distraught, made haste to ample Ilion with her son, and nurse, and made haste. It's spelled H-A-S-T, so I guess I'll pronounce it that way, because he's obviously trying to force the rhyme by spelling it that way. Herself for Greece, like one had made herself for Greece, like one distraught, made haste to ample Ilion with her son, and nurse. Like one distraught, made had made herself for Greece, like one distraught, made haste to ample Ilion with her son and nurse, and all the way mourned and dissolved in tears for him. Then Hector made no stay, but trod her path, and through the streets magnificently built, all the great city passed, and came where, seeing how blood was spilt, Andromache might see him come, who made as he would pass the ports without saluting her, not knowing where she was. She with his sight made breathless haste to meet him, not knowing where she was. She with his sight made breathless haste to meet him, she whose grace brought him withal so great a dower, so great a dower, she that of all the race of King Eetion, only lived, Eetion whose house stood beneath the mountain Placius, environed with the wood of Theban Hypoplace. Hippoplace. Hippopleki, being court to the Cilician land. Cilician? Environed beneath the mountain Placius, environed with the wood of Theban Hippoplas. Beneath the mountain Placius, environed with the wood of Theban Hippoplace, being court to the Cilician land. She ran to Hector, and with her, tender of heart and hand, her son, born in his nurse's arms. When, like a heavenly sign, compact of many golden stars, the princely child did shine, whom Hector called Scamandrius, but whom the town did name Astyanax, because his sire did only prop the same. Hector, though grief bereft his speech, yet smiled upon his joy. Andromache cried out, mixed hands, and to the strength of Troy thus wept forth her affection. All right, we need an Andromache voice. Andromache. And to the strength of Troy thus wept forth her affection. O noblest in desire, thy mind, inflamed with others' good, will set thyself on fire. Nor pitiest thou thy son, nor wife, who must thy widow be, if now thou issue. All the field will only run on thee. Better my shoulders underwent the earth than thy decease. Better my shoulders underwent the earth than thy decease. For then would earth bear joys no more. Then comes the black increase of Greeks. Then comes the black increase of griefs, like Greeks on Ilion. Alas, what one survives to be my refuge? One black day bereft 7 brothers' lives by stern Achilles. By his hand my father breathed his last, his high-walled rich Cilician Thebes sacked by him and laid waste. The royal body he yet he left unspoiled. Religion charmed that act of spoil, and all in fire he burned him, complete armed. Built over him a royal tomb, and to the monument he left of him the Oreides. Oreades. And to the monument he left of him the Oreades, that are the high descent of Aegis-bearing Jupiter, another of their own did add to it, and set it round with elms, by which is shown in theirs the barrenness of death. Yet might it serve beside to shelter the sad monument from all the ruffinous pride of storms and tempests, used to hurt things of that noble kind. The short life yet my mother lived he saved, and served his mind with all the riches of the realm, which not enough esteemed he kept her prisoner, whom small time but much more wealth redeemed, and she in sylvan Hippoplace. More wealth redeemed, and she in sylvan Hippoplace Cilicia ruled again, but soon was overruled by death. Diana's chaste disdain gave her a lance, and took her life. Yet all these gone from me, thou amply renderest all. Thy life makes still my father be, my mother, brother, and besides thou art my husband too. Most loved, most worthy, pity then, dear love, and do not go. For thou gone, all these go again. Pity our common joy, lest of a father's patronage, the bulwark of all Troy, thou leavest him in a poor widow's charge. Stay then in this tower, and call up to the wild fig tree all thy retired power. For there the wall is easiest scaled, and fittest for surprise, and there the Aegises, Idamen, the Atrides, Diomed, thrice have both surveyed. And there the Aegises, Idamen, the Atrides, Diomed, thrice have both surveyed and made attempt. I know not if induced by some wise augury, or the fact was naturally infused into their wits or courages. To this great Hector said, Be well assured, wife, all these things in my kind cares are weighed. But what a shame and fear it is to think how Troy would scorn, both in her husbands and her wives, whom long-trained gowns adorn, that I should cowardly fly off. The spirit I first did breathe did never teach me that. Much less since the contempt of death was settled in me, and my mind knew what a worthy was, whose office is to lead and fight, and give no danger pass without improvement. In his fire must Hector's trial shine. Improvement. In this fire must Hector's trial shine. Here must his country, father, friends be in him made divine. And such a stormy day shall come in my made divine. And such a stormy day shall come in mind and soul, I know, when sacred Troy shall shed her towers and tears. Shall shed her towers for tears of overthrow, when Priam, all his birth and power shall in those tears be drowned. But neither Troy's posterity, so much my soul did wound, But neither Troy's posterity so much my soul doth wound, Priam, nor Hecuba herself, nor all my brothers' woes, who though so many and so good must all be food for foes, as thy sad fate, when some rude Greek shall lead thee weeping hence, these free days clouded, and a night of captive violence. Clouded, and a night of captive violence. And a night of captive violence leading thy temples, out of which thine eyes must never see. Leading thy temples, out of which thine eyes must never see, but spin the Greek wives' webs of task, and there fetch water be to Argos from Mesiades or clear Hyperia's spring. Mesiades, Hyperia. From Mesiades or clear Hyperia's spring, which howsoever thou abhorrest, fate's such a shrewish thing, she will be mistress, whose cursed hands, when they shall crush out cries from thy oppressions, being beheld by other enemies, thus they will nourish thy extremes. This dame was Hector's wife, a man that at the wars of Troy did breathe the worthiest life of all their army. This again will rub thy fruitful wounds, to miss the man that to thy bands could give such narrow bounds. But that day shall not wound mine eyes. The solid heap of night shall interpose and stop mine ears against thy plaints and plight. This said, he reached. Plaints and plight. This said, he reached to take his son, who of his arms afraid, and then This said, he reached to take his son, who, of his arms afraid, and then the horsehair plume with which he was so overlaid nodded so horribly, he clinged back to his nurse and cried. Laughter affected his great sire, who doffed and laid aside his fearful helm, that on the earth cast round about it light. Then took and kissed his loving son, and balancing his weight in dancing him, these loving vows to living Jove he used, and all the other bench of gods. O you that have infused soul to this infant, now set down this blessing on his star, let his renown be clear as mine, equal his strength in war, and make his reign so strong in Troy that years to come may yield his facts this fame, when rich and spoils he leaves the conquered field sown with his slaughters. These high deeds exceed his father's worth. Let's just double check Hector here. Trojans and hardy Greeks, sown with his slaughters. These high deeds exceed his father's work. And let this echoed praise supply the comforts to come forth of his kind mother with my life. This said, the heroic sire gave him his mother, whose fair eyes fresh streams of love's salt fire billowed on her soft cheeks, to hear the last of Hector's speech, in which his vows comprised the sum of all he did beseech in her wished comfort. She took into her wished comfort. So she took into her odorous breast her husband's gift, who moved to see her heart so much oppressed. He dried her tears, and thus desired, "Afflict me not, dear wife, with these vain griefs. He doth not live that can disjoin my life. These vain griefs. He doth not live these vain griefs. He doth not live that can disjoin my life and this firm bosom, but my fate, and fate whose wings can my fate, and fate whose wing my fate, and fate whose wings can fly. Noble, ignoble fate controls. Once born, the best must die. Go home. Afflict me not, dear wife, with these vain griefs. He doth not live that can disjoin my life and this firm bosom, but my fate, and fate whose wings can fly, but my fate, and fate whose wings can fly. Noble, ignoble fate controls. Noble, ignoble fate controls. Once born, the best must die. Go home, and set thy housewife free on these extremes of thought, and drive war from them with thy maids. Keep them from doing. And drive war from them with thy maids. Keep them from doing naught. These will be nothing. Leave the cares of war to men and me. Not. These will be nothing. Will be not. These will be nothing. Leave the cares of war and men. Leave the cares of war to men and me. Leave the cares of war to men and me, in whom of all the Ilian race. Leave the cares of war to men and me, in whom of all the Ilian race they take their highest degree. On went his helm, his princess home, half cold with kindly fears, when every fear turned back her looks, and every look shed tears. Foes slaughtering Hector's house soon reached, her many women there wept. Foes slaughtering Hector's house soon reached, her many women there wept all to see her. In his life, great Hector's funerals were. Never looked any eye of theirs to see their lords safe home, scaped from the gripes and powers of Greece. And now was Paris come from his high towers, who made no stay when once he had put on his richest armor, but flew forth. The flints he trod upon sparked with luster of his arms. His long-ebbed spirits now flowed the higher for their lower ebb. And as a fair steed proud, with full given mangers, long tied up, and now his headstall broke, he breaks from stable. Long tied up, and now his headstall broke. He breaks from stable, runs the field, and with an ample stroke measures the center, neighs, and lifts along his wanton head. About his shoulders shakes his crest, and where he hath been fed, or in some calm flood washed, and where he hath been fed, or in some calm flood washed, or stung with his high plight, he flies amongst his females. Strength put forth, his beauty beautifies, and like life's mirror bears his gait. So Paris from the tower of lofty Pergamus came forth, He showed a sun-like power in carriage of his goodly parts, addressed now to the strife, and found his noble brother near the place he left his wife. Him thus respected he salutes. Right worthy I have fear that because thy sharp reproof left his wife. Him thus respected he salutes. Right worthy I have fear that your so serious haste to field my stay hath made forbear, and that I come not as you wish. Right worthy I have fear that your so serious haste to field my stay hath made forbear, and that I come not as you wish. Made forbear, and that I come not as you wish. Had made forbear, and that I come not as you wish. He answered, Honored man, be confident, for not myself nor any others can reprove thee in the work of fight, at least not any such as is an equal judge of things, for thou hast strength as much as serves to execute a mind very important. At least not any as such as is an equal judge of things, for thou hast strength as much as serves to execute a mind very important, but thy strength too readily flies off. Enough will is not put to thy ability. My heart is in my mind's strife sad, when Troy, out of her much distress, she and her friends have had by thy procurement, doth deprave thy noblesse in mine ears. But come, hereafter we shall calm these hard conceits of theirs, when from their ports the foe expulsed. High Jove to them have given wished peace, and us free sacrifice. High Jove to them hath given wished peace, and us free sacrifice to all the powers of heaven. But come, hereafter we shall noblesse in mine ears. But come, hereafter we shall calm all these hard conceits of theirs, when from their ports the foe expulsed, high Jove to them have given wished peace, and us free sacrifice to all the powers of heaven. Free sacrifice to all the powers of heaven.